The fluorescent lights of Terminal C at Denver International Airport flickered overhead as Marcus Thompson adjusted his tie one last time before boarding Flight 847 to Seattle. As the CEO of Thompson Industries, a billion-dollar manufacturing empire, he was accustomed to flying first class, but tonight felt different. Tonight, he was running from the most devastating day of his professional life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The merger he'd spent 3 years orchestrating had collapsed. That morning, 20,000 employees would lose their jobs by Christmas. The board had called an emergency meeting for tomorrow, and Marcus knew they were planning to remove him from the company his grandfather had built from nothing. As he settled into seat 2A, Marcus noticed the commotion several rows behind him. A young woman, probably in her early 20s, was struggling with an infant carrier while tears streamed down her face. The baby's cries echoed through the cabin, growing more desperate by the minute. Other passengers shot annoyed glances in her direction, some muttering complaints about crying babies on flights. The woman looked exhausted, defeated. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair hastily pulled back, and she kept apologizing to everyone around her in a voice barely above a whisper. Something about her desperation struck Marcus in a way he hadn't expected. The young woman's name was Sarah Chen, though Marcus wouldn't learn this until much later. At 23, she had already endured more hardship than most people face. In a lifetime. 6 months earlier, her husband David had been killed in a construction accident, leaving her alone with their 3-month-old daughter. Emma. Sarah had been working 2 jobs just to keep their small apartment in Denver, cleaning offices at night and serving tables during the day. But Emma had been born premature and required expensive medical care that their basic insurance barely covered. The medical bills had piled up like snow in a Colorado winter, relentless and suffocating. 3 days ago, Sarah had received the eviction notice. She had until Friday to come up with 3 months' rent or lose their home. With nowhere else to turn, she had called her estranged sister Michelle in Seattle, the sister she hadn't spoken to in 5 years after a bitter family argument over money. Michelle had reluctantly agreed to let Sarah and Emma stay for a few weeks, but her tone had been cold, transactional. "Just until you get back on your feet," she'd said. "I can't support you permanently." Sarah had used her last paycheck to buy the cheapest plane ticket she could find, a red-eye flight that cost $300 she couldn't afford to spend. She'd packed everything they owned into 2 suitcases and a diaper bag, selling the rest of their belongings to a second-hand store for $47. Now, as Flight 847 prepared for takeoff, Emma was inconsolable. The baby had been fussy all day, possibly sensing her mother's stress, and the change in air pressure during boarding had made everything worse. Sarah bounced Emma gently, trying every soothing technique she'd learned, but nothing worked. "Please, sweetheart, please stop crying," Sarah whispered, her own tears falling faster now. She was acutely aware of the other passengers' growing irritation. A businessman in the aisle seat kept checking his watch and sighing loudly. The elderly woman across from her had put on headphones and was pointedly ignoring them. Marcus watched this scene unfold from his first-class seat, separated by only a thin curtain from the main cabin. He'd been trying to review financial documents on his tablet, but found himself distracted by the young mother's quiet desperation. There was something familiar about her struggle, though he couldn't place what it was. The flight attendant, a stern-faced woman named Patricia, approached Sarah's row with barely concealed annoyance. "Ma'am, you need to keep your baby quiet," she said curtly. "Other passengers are complaining." "I'm trying," Sarah replied, her voice breaking. "She's usually not like this. I think the pressure change is bothering her ears, but I don't know what else to do." "Well, figure something out," Patricia snapped. "If this continues, we may have to ask you to take a later flight." Sarah's face went white. she couldn't afford. Another ticket, and Michelle was expecting them tonight. If they got kicked off this flight, Sarah would be stranded at the airport with a crying baby and nowhere to go. "Please," Sarah begged, "I can't take another flight. We have nowhere else to go tonight. I'll figure something out. Please don't make us leave." The desperation in her voice carried clearly to Marcus's seat. He found himself setting down his tablet and listening more intently. Something about the woman's situation was triggering memories he'd buried deep, memories of his own mother alone and struggling when he was young. Marcus had been born into poverty in a small town outside Detroit. His father had abandoned the family when Marcus was 5, leaving his mother Elena to raise him and his younger sister alone. Elena had worked 3 jobs, cleaning houses during the day, stocking shelves at a grocery store at night, and doing laundry for wealthy families on weekends. He remembered countless nights when his mother would come home exhausted, her hands raw from cleaning chemicals, only to find bills she couldn't pay stacked on their kitchen table. He remembered the shame in her eyes when she had to ask for help, the way she would apologize to everyone, the landlord when rent was late, the grocery store clerk when her food stamps didn't cover everything they needed, even to Marcus and his sister when there wasn't enough food for dinner. The memory that hit him hardest was from when he was 12. They had been evicted from their apartment and were staying at a homeless shelter downtown. His mother had saved enough money to take them to see his dying grandmother in California, but during the flight, Marcus's sister had gotten sick and started vomiting. The flight attendants had been cruel, treating them like they didn't belong in the cabin with the other passengers. His mother had cried that day, not from his sister's illness, but from the humiliation of being treated like they were less than human simply because they were poor. Marcus had sworn that day that he would never let anyone treat his family that way again, and that he would build enough wealth and power to protect the people he loved. Now, 35 years later, Marcus was one of the most powerful CEOs in America. But somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten the promise he'd made to that 12-year-old boy in the airplane. He'd become so focused on building his empire that he'd lost sight of why he'd wanted to build it in the first place. The baby's cries grew louder, and Marcus could hear Sarah's quiet sobs mixing with her daughter's distress. Other passengers were becoming increasingly vocal in their complaints. Someone called for the flight attendant again. Another passenger suggested that people like that shouldn't be allowed to fly if they can't control their children. Marcus felt something snap inside him. The callousness of the other passengers, the helplessness in the young mother's voice, the familiar scene of someone being kicked while they were already down, it all combined to awaken something in him that had been dormant for too long. Unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up, his 6'2" frame commanding attention even in the cramped airplane aisle. Without a word to anyone, he walked through the first-class curtain into the main cabin. Sarah was in row 15, middle seat, trapped between a sleeping businessman and an annoyed-looking woman who was making no effort to hide her displeasure. Emma was red-faced and screaming, her tiny fists waving in the air. Sarah looked up as Marcus approached, her eyes widening in confusion and fear. She probably thought he was another angry passenger coming to complain. "Excuse me," Marcus said, quietly, addressing the businessman in the aisle seat. "Would you mind switching seats with me?" The man looked up, irritated at being woken up. "What? No, I'm not switching seats. I paid for this seat." Marcus reached into his wallet and pulled out $500 bills. "I'll give you $1,000 to switch seats with me." The businessman's attitude changed immediately. Yeah, okay, sure." He grabbed his carry-on bag and practically sprinted toward first class, probably afraid Marcus would change his mind. Marcus settled into the aisle seat next to Sarah, who was staring at him in complete bewilderment. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "If you're here to complain about the noise, I understand. I'm trying everything I can think of, but she won't stop crying." I'm not here to complain, Marcus said gently. I'm here to help. My name is Marcus. What's yours? Sarah, she replied hesitantly, still bouncing Emma in her arms. This is Emma. I'm so sorry about the noise. I know everyone is angry. Don't apologize, Marcus said firmly. You have nothing to be sorry for. Babies cry. It's what they do. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me. He said the last part, loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear, and the complaints died down immediately. There was something about Marcus's presence, the expensive suit, the confident bearing, the way he commanded respect without saying much, that made people reconsider their complaints. Now, Marcus said, turning his full attention to Sarah. And Emma, let me see if I can help with this little one. I raised my nephew for a few years when my sister was going through a difficult time. Sometimes babies just need a different approach. Sarah looked uncertain, but desperate enough to try anything. She was at the end of her rope, emotionally and physically exhausted. When Marcus held out his hands, she hesitantly passed Emma to him. Marcus took the baby with practiced ease, supporting her head and holding her against his chest. He began walking up and down the aisle, swaying gently and humming a low rhythmic tune, the same song his mother used to hum to him and his sister when they were scared or upset. Gradually, Emma's cries began to subside. Her tiny fist grabbed onto Marcus's tie, and she seemed to relax against his broad chest. The change was remarkable. Within 5 minutes, she had stopped crying entirely and was looking up at Marcus with wide, curious eyes. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The cabin fell silent except for the drone of the airplane engines. Other passengers craned their necks to see what had happened to the crying baby. Sarah watched in amazement as this stranger, this well-dressed, clearly wealthy man, cradled her daughter like she was precious cargo. "How did you do that?" Sarah whispered, when Marcus returned to his seat, still holding a now calm Emma. "Sometimes. They just need to feel safe," Marcus replied, gently rocking the baby. "She was probably picking up on your stress and the negative energy from everyone around her. Babies are more perceptive than we give them credit for." Sarah felt fresh tears welling up in her eyes, but these were different from the tears of desperation she'd been crying earlier. These were tears of gratitude, relief, and something else she couldn't quite identify, the feeling of being seen and helped when she needed it most. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea what this means to me. Today has been the worst day of my life, and I thought it was just going to keep getting worse." Marcus looked at her more carefully, taking in the details he'd missed from his first-class seat. Her clothes were clean but worn, clearly second-hand. Her shoes had been resolved multiple times. Her purse was a cheap canvas bag, stuffed with baby supplies and what looked like important documents. Everything about her spoke of someone trying desperately to maintain dignity while struggling with poverty. "Do you want to talk about it?" Marcus asked gently. "Sometimes it helps to tell someone what's going on." Sarah hesitated for a moment, studying Marcus's face. There was something genuine in his expression, a kindness that seemed out of place. In her recent experience with the world, most people who had money, in her limited interactions, had treated her like she was invisible or, worse, like she was somehow less deserving of basic human decency. "I don't want to burden you with my problems," Sarah said quietly, reaching out to stroke Emma's tiny hand as the baby continued to rest peacefully in Marcus's arms. "You're not burdening me," Marcus replied. "I asked because I want to know. Sometimes talking to a stranger can be easier than talking to people who know you." Sarah took a shaky breath and began to speak. The words came slowly at first, then faster, as she realized how desperately she needed to tell someone what she was going through. "My husband died 6 months ago," she began, David was working construction on a high-rise downtown when the scaffolding collapsed. 5 workers fell that day, but he was the only one who didn't make it. Her voice caught slightly, but she continued. Emma was only 3 months old when it happened. She'll never even remember him. Marcus listened without interrupting, occasionally adjusting Emma's position as she dozed against his shoulder. Sarah found it easier to talk while watching her daughter sleep so peacefully, something that had seemed impossible just an hour earlier. David's company fought the workers' compensation claim, Sarah continued. They said it was an act of God, that the wind caused the accident, not faulty equipment. Our lawyer said we could fight it, but that would take years and cost money we don't have. Meanwhile, Emma needed surgery for a heart defect she was born with. The medical bills started piling up. She pulled a folded envelope from her purse, the edges worn from handling. "This is our eviction notice. I got it Monday. I've been working 2 jobs, but it's not enough. Even with government assistance, I can barely cover Emma's formula and diapers, let alone rent and utilities." Marcus examined the legal document Sarah handed him. The apartment complex was owned by Meridian Properties, a company he recognized as one of the most ruthless slumlords in Denver. They were known for quick evictions and aggressive collection practices, targeting tenants they knew couldn't afford legal representation. "So you're moving to Seattle?" Marcus asked, handing the notice back to her. "My sister Michelle lives there. We haven't spoken in 5 years. We had a falling out when our parents died, and we disagreed about settling their estate. She got the house, I got the debt." Sarah's laugh was bitter. "But she's the only family Emma and I have left. She said we could stay for a few weeks while I look for work." "What kind of work do you do?" "Whatever I can find. I was a semester away from finishing my nursing degree when I got pregnant with Emma, but I had to drop out when David got laid off from his previous job. I've been cleaning offices and waiting tables mostly. I'm good with my hands. I can fix things, paint, basic electrical work. David taught me a lot before he died." Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing Sarah's story. Her situation reminded him not just of his own childhood, but of countless employees he'd had to lay off over the years. He'd always told himself it was just business, that difficult decisions were part of leadership. But sitting here with Sarah holding her baby, he was confronted with the human cost of those decisions in a way that made him deeply uncomfortable. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said, breaking into his thoughts. "What do you do for work? You seem—" She gestured vaguely at his expensive suit and confident demeanor. Marcus hesitated. He'd become accustomed to people treating him differently once they learned who he was. Some became overly deferential, others suspicious of his motives. He'd learned that his wealth and position created a barrier between him and authentic human connection. "I run a manufacturing company," he said finally, which was technically true if drastically understated. "We make automotive parts mostly." "That must be interesting work," Sarah said politely. "David always said manufacturing was the backbone of America. He was proud to be building something that would last." The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. Here he was, talking to a woman whose husband had died in construction while Marcus was about to lay off 20,000 manufacturing workers. The contrast between David's pride in his work and Marcus's current corporate crisis felt like a judgment on everything he'd become. Emma stirred slightly in Marcus's arms, making a small sound before settling back into sleep. Sarah watched them, with an expression of wonder and gratitude that made Marcus's chest tighten with unfamiliar emotion. "She really likes you," Sarah observed. "She's usually so fussy with strangers." "You said you raised your nephew," Marcus nodded. "My sister Jennifer went through a rough patch when her son Tyler was little, addiction issues. I took care of Tyler for about 3 years while she got clean. He's in college now, studying engineering. That must have been hard, taking on that responsibility." "It was the best thing I ever did." Marcus said without thinking, then paused, surprised by his own honesty. He'd never admitted that to anyone, not even Jennifer. I learned more about what really matters during those 3 years than I had in the previous decade of my career. Are you close with them now? Marcus's expression darkened slightly. Not as close as we should be. Work has a way of taking over everything else. I keep telling myself I'll make more time for family, but there's always another crisis, another deal, another fire that needs putting out. Sarah studied his face, noting the regret in his voice. It sounds like you love what you do, though. I used to think I did. Lately, I'm not so sure. Marcus looked down at Emma, who had grabbed his finger in her tiny fist. I've been so focused on building something bigger that I forgot why I wanted to build it in the first place. The plane hit a patch of turbulence, causing several passengers to grip their armrests nervously. Emma barely stirred, completely trusting in Marcus's steady hold. Sarah watched him instinctively adjust his grip to keep the baby secure, moving, with the practiced ease of someone who truly understood how to care for a child. "You're really good with her," Sarah said softly. "She feels safe with you." Marcus felt something shift inside his chest at those words. When was the last time anyone had felt truly safe with him? His employees certainly didn't. They walked on eggshells around him, afraid to bring him bad news or challenge his decisions. His business partners saw him as a competitor to be managed or outmaneuvered. Even his romantic relationships had been transactions of a sort, both parties getting something they wanted but never truly vulnerable with each other. "Sarah," Marcus said suddenly, "what would you do if money wasn't an issue? If you could wave a magic wand and have any life you wanted, what would that look like?" The question caught Sarah off guard. She'd been focused on survival for so long that she'd stopped allowing herself to dream beyond the next week or month. "I'd finish nursing school," she said after a moment. "I was going to specialize in pediatric care. I love working with children, and I'm good at it. I'd want to work in a hospital where I could really make a difference in kids' lives." She paused, looking at Emma. "And I'd want to buy a small house somewhere safe, with a yard where Emma could play. Nothing fancy, just stable. Somewhere we could stay and build a life." "What about love? Would you want to find someone?" Sarah's expression grew wistful. "Maybe someday. David was my high school sweetheart. We'd been together since we were 16. I can't imagine loving anyone else right now, but I know he'd want Emma and me to be happy. He'd want her to have a father figure in her life." Marcus found himself imagining Sarah in a cap and gown, graduating from nursing school. He pictured her in scrubs, comforting sick children with the same gentle strength she'd shown tonight. He saw her in a small house with a garden, pushing Emma on a swing set, both of them laughing. The images were so vivid and appealing that they surprised him. When was the last time he'd thought about someone else's dreams with such interest and investment? "Those sound like beautiful dreams," Marcus said. "Not impossible ones either, just ones that need the right opportunities." "Dreams are expensive," Sarah replied with a sad smile. "Right now I'm focused on making sure Emma has formula and diapers. Everything else feels like luxury." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching Emma sleep peacefully in his arms. An idea was forming in his mind, something that felt both crazy and completely logical at the same time. He thought about the merger that had collapsed, the employees he was about to let go, the board meeting tomorrow where they would likely fire him. What if, instead of fighting to save a company that had lost its way, he used his resources to help someone who truly needed it? What if he could be the opportunity that Sarah needed? "Sarah," he said carefully, "I want to ask you something, and I need you to think about it seriously before you answer." Sarah looked at Marcus with curiosity and a hint of wariness. Something in his tone had shifted, becoming more serious, more purposeful. She'd learned to be cautious when people offered help. In her experience, there was usually a catch. "What do you want to ask me?" she said quietly. Marcus took a deep breath, still cradling Emma against his chest. "I want to help you. Not just tonight, not just with the baby crying on the plane. I want to help you build the life you just described." Sarah blinked in confusion. "I don't understand. You don't even know me." "You're right. I don't know you well, but I know enough. I know you're a mother who would rather be humiliated in front of a plane full of strangers than give up on providing for your daughter. I know you're willing to swallow your pride and reach out to a sister you haven't spoken to in years because you'll do anything to keep Emma safe. I know you had dreams of helping other people's children even while you were struggling to take care of your own." Marcus paused, looking directly into Sarah's eyes. "And I know that you remind me of someone very important to me, my mother. She was in your position once, alone with 2 young children, working multiple jobs just to survive. The difference is, no one stepped up to help her. She died when I was in college, worn out from years of struggling to make ends meet." Sarah's expression softened with understanding and sympathy. "I'm sorry for your loss. The point is," Marcus continued, "I'm in a position to help you in a way that no one was able to help her. And I think maybe helping you is exactly what I need to do right now." "What kind of help are you talking about?" Sarah asked carefully. Marcus had been formulating the plan as they talked, but saying it out loud would make it real. "I want to offer you a job. A real job, with benefits and security. Something that would let you support Emma while you finish your nursing degree." Sarah stared at him. "What kind of job? I don't have any special skills, and I can't afford to move somewhere expensive. You said you're good with your hands, that you can fix things. My company has several facilities that need maintenance supervisors, people who can handle basic repairs, coordinate with contractors, manage supplies. It's not glamorous work, but it pays well and comes with full health insurance. Where would this job be? I have a plant in Spokane, about 4 hours east of Seattle. The cost of living is reasonable, and there's a community college there with an excellent nursing program. You could work during the day and take classes in the evening." Sarah felt dizzy, trying to process what Marcus was suggesting. "You're offering me a job at your company based on a conversation on an airplane." "I'm offering you a chance," Marcus corrected. "The same chance I wish someone had offered my mother, the same chance that everyone deserves but doesn't always get." Emma stirred in Marcus's arms, opening her eyes and looking up at him with that unfocused gaze that newborns have. She didn't cry, just studied his face with serious concentration. "Hello, little one," Marcus said softly. "What do you think? Should your mama take a chance on a stranger who makes car parts?" Despite everything, Sarah found herself smiling at the interaction between Marcus and her daughter. Emma seemed completely comfortable with him, more relaxed than Sarah had seen her in weeks. "This is crazy," Sarah said. "People don't just offer jobs to random people on airplanes." "Maybe they should," Marcus replied. "Maybe if more people helped each other when they had the opportunity, the world would be a better place." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, thinking. The rational part of her mind was screaming that this was too good to be true, that there had to be a catch. But another part of her, the part that had been running on desperation and prayer for months, was whispering that maybe this was the miracle she'd been hoping for. "What would you expect from me?" she asked finally. "I mean, besides the work itself." "Nothing," Marcus said firmly. "This isn't charity, Sarah. It's employment. You do the job, do it well, and earn your paycheck just like everyone else. The only difference is that I'm offering you the opportunity to prove yourself instead of making you compete with 50 other applicants who might have better credentials on paper. And if I don't work out, if I'm not good at the job, then we'll figure out something else. But I don't think that's going to be a problem. You've managed to keep yourself and Emma fed and housed while working 2 jobs and dealing with medical bills and grief. Managing a maintenance department is going to seem easy compared to what you've already accomplished. Sarah looked around the airplane cabin as if seeing it clearly for the first time. An hour ago, she'd been on the verge of a breakdown, facing an uncertain future with no real plan beyond imposing on her sister's reluctant hospitality. Now, a stranger was offering her a path forward, a way to build the life she'd described. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this for someone you just met?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Because I can, because you need help and I'm in a position to provide it, because my mother never had someone step up for her, and maybe if she had, she'd still be alive today." He shifted Emma to his other arm, and she settled against him without protest. "But if I'm being completely honest, it's also because I need this as much as you do. I've spent so many years focused on making money and building power that I've forgotten what it feels like to actually help someone, to make a difference in a real person's life, instead of just moving numbers around on spreadsheets." Sarah could hear the sincerity in his voice, but she'd learned to be cautious. "What's your company called? I want to look it up when we land." "Thompson Industries," Marcus said, then added with a slight smile, "You might want to sit down when you do that. Google search." Something in his tone made Sarah look at him more closely. Thompson Industries. The name sounded familiar, though she couldn't place where she'd heard it. "How big is your company?" she asked. "Big enough that offering you a job won't strain our budget?" Marcus said diplomatically. The flight attendant, who had been rude to Sarah earlier, approached their row, but her demeanor had completely changed. She'd clearly noticed Marcus's expensive clothing and authoritative presence, and had probably overheard parts of their conversation. "Excuse me, sir," Patricia said in a much more respectful tone than she'd used with Sarah. "Is there anything I can get for you or the young lady? Something to drink? A pillow for the baby?" "We're fine, thank you," Marcus replied coolly. Sarah noticed that he didn't thank the flight attendant for her sudden attentiveness, and she appreciated that he wasn't rewarding Patricia's change in behavior. After Patricia left, Sarah looked at Marcus with new understanding. "You're someone important, aren't you? More important than just running a manufacturing company. I'm someone with resources and influence," Marcus admitted, "but that doesn't make me more important than you or anyone else on this plane. It just makes me more fortunate. And with that fortune comes responsibility." Emma had fallen back asleep, her tiny hand still clutching Marcus's finger. Sarah watched them together and felt something she hadn't experienced since David's death. Hope, real, tangible hope for a future that looked different than the endless cycle of struggle she'd been trapped in. "If I said yes," Sarah said slowly, "when would I start?" "Whenever you're ready. I can have HR prepare an offer letter tonight, and you could start as soon as you get Emma settled. We'd help with relocation expenses, of course, security deposit, on an apartment, moving costs, that sort of thing. This is really happening," Sarah said, more to herself than to Marcus. "This is really happening." "Only if you want it to happen," Marcus said. "It's your choice, Sarah. No pressure, no strings attached, just an opportunity." Sarah looked at her sleeping daughter, then at the man who was holding her like she was precious cargo. Something deep in her chest was telling her to trust this moment, to trust this person who had appeared in her life exactly when she needed him most. "Yes," she said quietly, "yes, I want to take the chance." Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him at Sarah's acceptance, though he couldn't entirely explain why her answer mattered so much to him. Perhaps it was because, for the first time in years, he was making a decision based purely on what felt right, rather than what would benefit his bottom line. "There's something I need to tell you," Marcus said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "Something about my company and my situation that you should know before we move forward." Sarah tensed slightly. Here it comes, she thought, the catch she'd been waiting for. "Thompson Industries is larger than I initially let on," Marcus continued carefully. We're a Fortune 500 company with about 40,000 employees worldwide. I'm not just someone who works there. I'm the CEO and primary shareholder. Sarah's eyes widened as the implications hit her. You're a billionaire. On paper, yes, Marcus said, looking uncomfortable with the admission. But here's the thing. My company is in crisis. Yesterday, a merger I'd been working on for 3 years fell apart. As a result, I'm going to have to lay off about half our workforce by the end of the year. 20,000 people are going to lose their jobs because of decisions I made. He shifted Emma gently as she stirred in her sleep. The board of directors called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. They're planning to remove me as CEO. After tomorrow, I might not have a company to offer you a job with. Sarah stared at him, trying to process this information. So, when you offer me a job, I'm offering you something I might not be able to deliver, Marcus finished, which is why I needed to be honest with you. If the board fires me tomorrow, Thompson Industries will be run by people who don't know you and didn't make any promises. Then why make the offer at all? Sarah asked, though not accusingly. She was genuinely curious about his reasoning. Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Because even if they fire me, I still have personal resources. I still have connections in the industry. I still have the ability to help you build the life you want, even if it's not exactly the way I originally planned. He looked directly at Sarah, his expression earnest. I've spent the last 20 years building wealth and power, telling myself it was all for a good purpose. But sitting here with you and Emma, I realize I've lost sight of what that purpose was supposed to be. Maybe getting fired tomorrow would be the best thing that could happen to me. What would you do if they fire you? I honestly don't know, Marcus admitted. I've been Marcus Thompson, CEO, for so long that I'm not sure who Marcus Thompson, regular person, would be. But I know I want to find out, and I know I want to help you succeed, regardless of what happens to me professionally. Sarah absorbed this information, her mind racing. The man holding her daughter was one of the most powerful people in America, yet he was facing his own crisis. The parallel wasn't lost on her. Both of them were flying toward uncertain futures. Both of them dealing with circumstances beyond their control. Can I ask you something? Sarah said. Those 20,000 people you're laying off, do they have families? Kids? Marcus nodded grimly. Most of them do. I've been trying not to think about it, but yes. There are probably 5,000 children who are going to watch their parents lose their jobs because of my decisions. And that bothers you. It's killing me, Marcus said quietly. I keep telling myself it's just business, that sometimes difficult decisions have to be made for the greater good. But the truth is, I chose to pursue a merger that was risky, and when it failed, other people are paying the price for my ambition. Sarah was quiet for a moment, studying Marcus's face. She could see the genuine pain in his expression, the weight of responsibility he was carrying. It occurred to her that wealth and power didn't shield someone from guilt or regret. They might actually make those feelings worse. What if you didn't lay them off? Sarah asked. What if you found another way? There is no other way, Marcus said. The company is overextended. We took on too much debt to finance the merger. Without the revenue that deal would have brought in, we can't afford to keep everyone employed. But you're a billionaire. Couldn't you use your personal money to keep people employed while you figure out a different solution? Marcus looked at her with surprise. The question was so simple, so obvious, yet it hadn't occurred to him. He'd been thinking like a CEO, compartmentalizing his personal wealth from his corporate responsibilities. But Sarah was thinking like a human being, asking why someone with vast resources wouldn't use them to prevent suffering. I could, Marcus said slowly. It would be expensive, and there's no guarantee it would work long-term, but I could probably buy the company 18 months to find alternative revenue streams. Would that be enough time? Maybe. Probably. We have good products and strong customer relationships. The merger was supposed to expand our market reach, but there are other ways to grow a business. Emma woke up and began to fuss slightly. Sarah reached for her, but Marcus gestured that he had her handled. He stood up and began swaying gently, the same motion that had calmed Emma earlier. Within minutes, she was peaceful again. "You're really good at that," Sarah observed. "I've had practice," Marcus said, sitting back down. "But also, I think she trusts me. Kids and animals have good instincts about people." "She does trust you," Sarah agreed. "I trust you too, which is probably crazy, given that I met you 2 hours ago." "Why do you trust me?" Sarah considered the question seriously. "Because you didn't have to help me tonight. You could have stayed in first class and ignored a crying baby like everyone else. Instead, you came back here and helped a stranger, even though it cost you money and comfort. That tells me something about who you are." Marcus felt something shift in his chest at her words. When was the last time someone had seen him as fundamentally good? His business associates respected his acumen and feared his power, but trust and goodness weren't part of their vocabulary when it came to corporate relationships. "There's something else," Sarah continued. "When you talk about those 20,000 employees, you don't sound like someone making a cold business decision. You sound like someone who's heartbroken about hurting people. That matters to me." "I am heartbroken about it," Marcus admitted. "I've been trying to convince myself that I'm not, that it's just the nature of business, but sitting here talking to you has made me realize I can't keep lying to myself." The plane began its descent into Seattle, and the flight attendant announced that they would be landing in 20 minutes. Marcus felt a strange sense of panic at the thought of this conversation ending, of returning to the regular world where he was CEO Marcus Thompson instead of just Marcus, the man holding a baby on an airplane. "Sarah," he said urgently, "I want you to know that regardless of what happens tomorrow, regardless of whether I keep my job or get fired, I'm going to keep my promise to you. You and Emma are going to have the opportunities you deserve." "And I want you to know," Sarah replied, "that talking to you tonight has given me hope for the first time in months, not just because of the job offer, but because you've reminded me that there are still good people in the world who help each other." Marcus pulled out his phone and opened his contacts. "I'm going to give you my personal number, not my assistant's. Number, not my office line, my actual cell phone. I want you to call me tomorrow after I deal with my board meeting. We'll figure out next steps together." Sarah programmed his number into her own phone, a device so old and cracked that Marcus made a mental note to buy her a new one as soon as possible. "What if your board meeting goes badly?" Sarah asked. Marcus smiled, and for the first time in months it felt genuine. "Then I'll finally be free to do what I should have been doing all along, helping people instead of just making money." The plane touched down at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport at 11:47 p.m., 3 minutes ahead of schedule. As the aircraft taxied toward the gate, Marcus felt an unexpected reluctance to let this moment end. In the space of a few hours, his entire perspective on his life and priorities had shifted dramatically. Emma had slept peacefully for the remainder of the flight, and Sarah had dozed fitfully against the window, exhaustion finally overcoming her anxiety. Marcus had spent the time thinking about the board meeting he would face in less than 10 hours, but instead of dreading it, he found himself strangely calm. As the plane came to a stop and the seatbelt sign turned off, passengers began gathering their belongings with the usual post-flight urgency. Sarah woke up and looked around, momentarily disoriented. "We're here," Marcus said gently, still holding Emma. "Seattle." "I can't believe I slept," Sarah said, rubbing her eyes. "I haven't been able to sleep properly in weeks." "You felt safe," Marcus observed. "Sometimes that's all we need." Sarah looked at him, holding her daughter, and felt a pang of sadness that this unexpected sanctuary was about to end. I should take her now. You probably need to get going. Actually, Marcus said, I don't have anywhere urgent to be. My flight to Denver doesn't leave until tomorrow afternoon. Would you like me to help you get settled with your sister? Sarah hesitated. The offer was tempting, but she was already feeling overwhelmed by Marcus's generosity. You don't need to do that. You've already done so much. I'd like to, Marcus said simply. Besides, I want to make sure you and Emma get where you're going safely. Consider it the final part of tonight's journey. As they gathered their belongings and prepared to disembark, other passengers began recognizing Marcus. A businessman in the row behind them had been making phone calls during the descent and had clearly looked up Thompson Industries. Word was spreading quietly through the cabin that they were in the presence of a celebrity CEO. Mr. Thompson, the businessman approached as they stood in the aisle. I'm Robert Chen from Hartwell Financial. I just wanted to say it's an honor to meet you. I've been following your company's performance for years. Marcus nodded politely but kept his attention focused on Sarah and Emma. Thank you, but we need to get going. As they walked through the jet bridge, more people began to notice Marcus. A few passengers pulled out their phones to take pictures. Sarah watched this attention with a growing understanding of just how significant Marcus truly was in the business world. This happens a lot, doesn't it? She asked as they reached the gate area. More than I'd like, Marcus admitted. It's one of the reasons I usually travel with security, but tonight I wanted to be alone with my thoughts. They made their way through the terminal, Marcus carrying Emma while Sarah managed their luggage. Despite the late hour, SeaTac was still busy, with red-eye flights and delayed passengers. Marcus guided them toward the baggage claim area, moving with the confidence of someone accustomed to navigating airports efficiently. My sister is supposed to pick us up, Sarah said, checking her phone. She texted that she's in the cell phone waiting lot. What did you tell her about tonight? About me? Sarah realized she hadn't thought about how to explain Marcus's presence. I haven't told her anything yet. I wasn't sure what to say. As they waited for Sarah's bags at the carousel, Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. Sarah, I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you really want to stay with your sister? From what you've told me, it doesn't sound like a situation that will be good for you or Emma long term. Sarah was quiet for a moment. I don't have any other choice. Yes, you do, Marcus said. You have the choice I offered you on the plane. But instead of waiting to see what happens with my company tomorrow, what if we moved forward tonight? What do you mean? Marcus pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Jennifer, it's Marcus. I know it's late, but I need a favor. He paused, listening. I'm in Seattle, and I have a friend who needs a place to stay for a few days. Someone with a baby. Could she stay in your guest room? Sarah stared at him in disbelief as he continued the conversation with his sister. Her name is Sarah Chen, and she has a 3-month-old daughter named Emma. She's had a difficult time recently, and I'd consider it a personal favor if you could help her out. Another pause. Yes, I'll explain everything later. Can you come? Pick us up at the airport. Marcus ended the call and turned to Sarah. My sister Jennifer lives about 20 minutes from here. She's a nurse practitioner, so she understands what it's like to work with people in difficult situations. She's also excellent with children, obviously, since she raised Tyler. Marcus, I can't impose on your family, Sarah protested. Your sister doesn't even know me. She knows me and she trusts my judgment. Besides, she owes me about 1,000 favors from when I helped with Tyler. Marcus's expression grew serious. Sarah, I meant what I said on the plane. I want to help. You build a better life, but that starts with getting you away from situations where you feel like a burden or charity case. But my sister is expecting me. Then call her and explain that your plans changed. Tell her you found another place to stay and that you'll be in touch once you get settled. Sarah felt torn between gratitude and uncertainty. Everything was happening so fast, and she'd learned to be wary of situations that seemed too good to be true. But looking at Marcus holding Emma with such natural care, she found herself wanting to trust this unexpected turn of events. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Really? What do you get out of helping me?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Honestly? I get to remember who I used to be before I became obsessed with profit margins and market share. I get to feel like I'm making a difference in someone's life instead of just shuffling money around spreadsheets." He shifted Emma to his other arm as she stirred slightly. "But there's something else. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to walk into that board meeting and either fight to save my company or accept that it's time to move on to something different. Either way, I want to go into that room knowing that I've already started making choices based on what's right rather than what's profitable." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from her sister Michelle. "She's asking when I'll be ready for pickup." "What do you want to do?" Marcus asked gently. "I'm not trying to pressure you. If you want to stay with your sister, I'll respect that decision. And we'll figure out how to move forward from there. But if you want to take another leap of faith tonight, Jennifer is on her way." Sarah looked at Emma, sleeping peacefully in Marcus's arms, then at her phone with Michelle's text. She thought about the cold tone in her sister's voice during their phone call, the reluctant offer of a few weeks of help, the years of unresolved tension between them. Then she thought about Marcus's offer of genuine assistance. His sister, who was driving to the airport at midnight to help a stranger, and the possibility of building something real instead of just surviving from crisis to crisis. "I want to take the leap," Sarah said quietly. "I want to trust that this is the opportunity I've been praying for." Marcus smiled, and Sarah realized it was the first time she'd seen him look truly happy all evening. "Good. Now call your sister and let her know your plans have changed. Jennifer will be here in about 15 minutes. As Sarah dialed Michelle's number, Marcus looked down at Emma and whispered, "Looks like we're all about to start new chapters, little one. I hope you're ready for the adventure." The phone call with Michelle went better than Sarah had expected, though not without its complications. Her sister's initial confusion quickly turned to suspicion when Sarah explained that her plans had changed and she would be staying with a friend instead. "What friend?" Michelle had demanded. "You don't know anyone in Seattle?" "Someone I met on the flight," Sarah said, trying to keep her explanation simple. "A businessman who offered to help me get settled." "A strange man offered to help you." "Sarah, that sounds incredibly dangerous. You have a baby to think about." Sarah glanced at Marcus, who was still holding Emma and pretending not to listen to her conversation. "He's not a stranger anymore, Michelle. It's hard to explain, but I trust him." "You've known him for what, 3 hours? And you're going to stay at his house instead of with your own sister?" The hurt in Michelle's voice was unmistakable, and Sarah felt a pang of guilt. Despite their estrangement, Michelle had been willing to help when Sarah needed it most. But Sarah also remembered the reluctance in her sister's voice, the barely concealed resentment about taking in her irresponsible younger sister. "It's not like that," Sarah said gently. "Michelle, you know things have been difficult between us. I don't want to put more strain on our relationship by moving in when we haven't resolved our issues. This gives us both some space to figure things out." After several more minutes of discussion, Michelle reluctantly agreed to postpone the pickup. She insisted on meeting Marcus before Sarah went anywhere with him, a condition that Sarah readily accepted. "She wants to meet you," Sarah told Marcus after ending the call, "to make sure you're not a serial killer." "That's reasonable," Marcus said with a smile. I'd want to do the same thing if I were in her position. Should I give her references? Background check? Credit report? Sarah laughed, realizing it was the first time she genuinely laughed in weeks. I think your Forbes profile might be enough. While they waited for Jennifer to arrive, Marcus made another series of phone calls. Sarah listened as he spoke with what sounded like lawyers and financial advisors, discussing strategies for the board meeting and contingency plans for various scenarios. Are you having second thoughts about tomorrow? Sarah asked when he finished his calls. Actually, no, Marcus said, surprising himself with the answer. For the first time in months, I feel clear about what I need to do. Whether the board keeps me or fires me, I'm going to make some fundamental changes in how I approach business. What kind of changes? Marcus adjusted Emma's position as she began to stir. I'm going to propose using my personal assets to prevent the layoffs, at least temporarily. If the board agrees, we'll restructure the company to focus on sustainable growth rather than aggressive expansion. If they refuse and fire me, I'll start something new. What would you start? I'm not sure yet. Maybe something in manufacturing that focuses on creating good jobs rather than just maximizing profit. Maybe something that helps other people in your situation, single parents who need opportunities, not charity. Sarah studied his face, noting the genuine excitement in his voice when he talked about these possibilities. You really mean that, don't you? You'd walk away from $1 billion company to start over. Money is just numbers on a screen if you're not using it to make the world better, Marcus said. I lost sight of that somewhere along the way, but tonight has reminded me what actually matters. Emma woke up fully and began to fuss, her small face scrunching up in preparation for another crying session. But Marcus began the same gentle swaying motion that had worked on the plane, humming quietly, and she settled back down within minutes. She's going to miss you when this is over, Sarah observed. Who says it has to be over? Marcus asked. I meant what I said about helping you build the life you want. That's not a one-night offer, Sarah. That's a commitment. Before Sarah could respond, a woman approached them from across the terminal. She was tall, like Marcus, with similar dark hair, but a warmer, more open expression. She wore scrubs and looked like she had come directly from work. Marcus, the woman called out, what are you doing holding a baby in the middle of SeaTac Airport at midnight? Marcus stood up, still cradling Emma. Jennifer, meet Sarah Chen, and her daughter Emma. Sarah, this is my sister Jennifer. Jennifer looked between Marcus and Sarah with barely concealed curiosity. So, you're the friend who needs a place to stay, and my brother is babysitting because Emma and I bonded on the flight, Marcus said simply. She stopped crying when I held her, and she's been peaceful ever since. Jennifer's expression softened as she looked at Emma sleeping peacefully in Marcus's arms. As a healthcare professional and a mother, she recognized the significance of a baby being so comfortable with someone. What's your story, Sarah? Jennifer asked gently. Marcus didn't give me any details, just said you needed help. Sarah gave Jennifer a condensed version of her situation: David's death, the medical bills, the eviction, the difficult relationship with her own sister. Jennifer listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions. I'm sorry for your loss, Jennifer said when Sarah finished. Losing a partner when you have a young child. I can't imagine how difficult that must be. Thank you, Sarah said, and thank you for agreeing to help us. I know it's an unusual situation. Trust me, unusual situations involving my brother are nothing new, Jennifer said with a wry smile. But this is the first time one of them involved a baby. Marcus, can I talk to you privately for a minute? Marcus handed Emma to Sarah, and the sisters stepped a few feet away for a hushed conversation. Sarah couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could see Jennifer's expressions ranging from surprise to concern, to something that looked like approval. When they returned, Jennifer's demeanor had shifted to one of warm welcome. "Sarah, I'd be happy to have you and Emma stay with us. I have a guest room with a crib, my son Tyler's old room, that I've kept set up for when friends visit with their children." "That's incredibly generous," Sarah said. "I promise we won't be any trouble." "Actually," Jennifer said, glancing at Marcus, "having you there might be good for me too. I work long shifts at the hospital and Tyler's away at college. The house feels empty sometimes. It'll be nice to have a baby around again." As they gathered Sarah's luggage and prepared to leave the airport, Sarah's phone rang. Michelle's name appeared on the screen. "I should take this," Sarah said, stepping aside. "Sarah, I've been thinking about our conversation." Michelle's voice was tight with emotion. "I know we haven't been close lately, but you're still my sister. If this man turns out to be dangerous, if anything happens to you or Emma—" "Nothing's going to happen," Sarah said firmly. "Michelle, I know this sounds crazy, but I think meeting Marcus tonight was exactly what Emma and I needed. For the first time since David died, I feel like there's a path forward that doesn't involve just surviving from crisis to crisis." "But you don't really know him." Sarah looked across the terminal at Marcus, who was now holding Emma again, while Jennifer cooed at the baby. Emma was reaching up to grab Marcus's tie, her face relaxed and happy in a way Sarah hadn't seen since before David's death. "You're right. I don't know his entire life story," Sarah said, "but I know how he treats a crying baby on a plane when no one's watching. I know he gave up his first-class comfort to sit next to a stranger who needed help. I know he talks about his employees like they're people, not numbers. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts, Michelle." After a few more minutes of conversation, Michelle reluctantly agreed to respect Sarah's decision, though she insisted on daily check-ins and demanded Jennifer's contact information just in case. As they finally headed toward the airport exit, Sarah felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. 24 hours ago, she'd been facing eviction with nowhere to turn. Now, she was walking through an airport with a billionaire CEO who had offered her a job, staying with his sister who was a nurse, and holding her daughter who hadn't cried in hours. "This doesn't feel real," Sarah said to Marcus as they reached Jennifer's car. "The best changes in life rarely do," Marcus replied, "but sometimes you have to trust that the universe is putting you exactly where you need to be." The next morning arrived grey and drizzly, typical for Seattle in early fall. Sarah woke up in Jennifer's guest room, feeling more rested than she had in months. Emma had slept through the night for the first time since David's death, perhaps sensing the safety and stability of their new environment. Jennifer had already left for her shift at the hospital, but she'd left coffee brewing and a note with her work number and instructions for anything Sarah might need. The kindness of strangers, or rather, the kindness of people who were no longer strangers, still amazed Sarah. Marcus had spent the night at a nearby hotel, but arrived at Jennifer's house at 8 in the morning, looking more relaxed than he had on the plane, despite the crucial board meeting ahead of him. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, but his demeanor was calmer, more centered than the anxious executive Sarah had first encountered. "How did you sleep?" he asked, accepting a cup of coffee while Emma gurgled happily in her carrier. "Better than I have in months," Sarah admitted. "Emma, too. I think she feels safe here." "Good. That was the goal." Marcus sat down across from Sarah at Jennifer's kitchen table. "I wanted to talk to you before I head to Denver. Regardless of what happens in that boardroom today, I want you to know that everything I promised you last night stands. The job, the support, the opportunity to build something better. It's all real." Sarah studied his face, noting the determination in his expression. "You've made a decision about the board meeting, haven't you?" "I have." Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Sarah a document he'd been working on since dawn. "I'm going to propose a complete restructuring of the company. Instead of layoffs, I'm suggesting we use my personal assets to fund a transition period while we pivot to sustainable manufacturing practices and employee ownership models. Employee ownership? Giving workers a stake in the company's success, instead of just making them disposable when times get tough. It's not a new concept, but it's not common in companies our size. Marcus leaned forward, his excitement evident. I've been running numbers all morning. If we restructure the debt and reinvest in our workforce instead of pursuing aggressive expansion, we can build something much stronger and more ethical. And if the board says no? Marcus smiled, and Sarah realized it was the first completely peaceful smile she'd seen from him. Then I'll resign, take my severance package, and start a new company built on the principles I should have been following all along. Either way, I win, because either way you get to sleep at night knowing you did the right thing. Exactly. Marcus reached over and gently touched Emma's tiny hand. This little girl and her mother reminded me what business should really be. About creating opportunities for people to build good lives for their families. At 10:30, Marcus's car arrived to take him to the airport. As he prepared to leave, he turned to Sarah with an expression of genuine gratitude. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? You're the one who helped me. You helped me remember who I used to be before I got lost in spreadsheets and profit margins. You reminded me that success isn't just about accumulating wealth. It's about using whatever resources you have to make other people's lives better. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. Marcus, whatever happens today, you've already changed Emma's life and mine. I'll never forget that. You won't have to forget it, Marcus said, because this is just the beginning of our friendship, not the end. He knelt down to Emma's eye level. Be good for your mama, little one. I'll see you both very soon. The board meeting took place in Thompson Industries' downtown Denver headquarters, in a glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor. 12 board members sat around a polished mahogany table, their faces showing various degrees of concern, frustration, and skepticism. Marcus entered the room at exactly 2 o'clock, carrying a leather portfolio containing his restructuring proposal. The tension was immediate and palpable. Gentlemen, ladies, Marcus began, taking his seat at the head of the table. I know you called this meeting to discuss my removal as CEO following the collapse of the Meridian merger. Before you make that decision, I'd like to present an alternative proposal. For the next hour, Marcus outlined his plan with passion and precision. He proposed using $50 million of his personal wealth to prevent the layoffs, restructuring the company's debt, and transitioning to a model that prioritized long-term sustainability over short-term profits. You're suggesting we turn a publicly traded corporation into some kind of social experiment, said board member Robert Kellerman, his voice dripping with disdain. I'm suggesting we turn a failing corporation into a successful one by investing in our greatest asset, our people, Marcus replied calmly. Companies with engaged, empowered workforces consistently outperform those that treat employees as disposable resources. The debate continued for 2 more hours. Some board members were intrigued by Marcus's proposal, others were openly hostile. In the end, the vote was closer than anyone had expected. 7 votes to remove Marcus as CEO, 5 votes to approve his restructuring plan. Marcus stood up as the results were announced, feeling lighter than he had in years. Thank you for your time, he said simply. I'll have my resignation letter on your desk within the hour. I wish you all the best in finding new leadership. As Marcus walked out of the boardroom, his phone was already ringing with calls from reporters who had gotten wind of the dramatic board meeting, but the only call he answered was from Sarah. How did it go? She asked anxiously. They fired me, Marcus said, and Sarah could hear the smile in his voice, and I've never been happier about anything in my professional life. 3 months later, Sarah was working as the facilities manager at Thompson Community Manufacturing, Marcus's new company located in Spokane, Washington. The business focused on sustainable production methods and employee ownership, with every worker receiving profit sharing and a voice in company decisions. Sarah had enrolled in the evening nursing program at Spokane Community College and was excelling in her studies. Emma was thriving in the company's on-site childcare facility, which Marcus had insisted be part of their benefits package. Marcus visited the Spokane facility twice a month, always making time to check on Sarah and Emma. He'd become something between a mentor, a friend, and the father figure Emma had never known. The little girl would light up whenever she saw him, reaching her arms up to be held by the man who had first comforted her on an airplane. On a crisp December evening, as Sarah was finishing her shift and preparing to pick up Emma from daycare, Marcus appeared in her office doorway. "How's the facilities manager business treating you?" he asked with a grin. "Better than I ever dreamed," Sarah replied honestly. "I love this work, and I love knowing that I'm part of building something meaningful." "Speaking of building something meaningful," Marcus said, his expression growing more serious, "I have something to ask you." Sarah looked up from her computer, curious about his tone. "Emma's first birthday is next month," Marcus continued. "I know it's going to be an emotional day for you, thinking about David and everything that's happened since then. I was wondering if you'd let me throw her a party. Nothing elaborate, just Jennifer and Tyler, maybe some of your co-workers who've become friends. I want to celebrate how far you've both come." Sarah felt her eyes filling with tears, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "Marcus, that would be wonderful. Emma loves you so much, and I can't imagine going through this transition without you." "You'll never have to find out," Marcus said gently. "You and Emma are family now, Sarah. Not because I helped you once, but because you helped me remember what family really means." As Sarah drove home that evening with Emma babbling happily in her car seat, she thought about the night that had changed everything. A plane full of annoyed passengers, a crying baby, and a stranger who chose kindness over comfort. It seemed impossible that such a simple act, one man deciding to help instead of complain, could have led to such profound changes for both of them. But perhaps that was the point. Perhaps the most important moments in life weren't the grand gestures or dramatic turning points, but the quiet decisions to treat each other with dignity and compassion when no one was watching. Emma fell asleep during the drive home, her tiny face peaceful and content. Sarah glanced at her daughter in the rearview mirror and smiled, thinking about all the possibilities that lay ahead for both of them. Sometimes, she reflected, the most important flights aren't the ones that take you to a destination. They're the ones that take you home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.